Hello, welcome to Wellbeing. On this edition, we're exploring a question that touches almost every household. Can what we eat influence how we feel? New research from the Translational Research Institute in Brisbane has found clear connections between diet and mental health, showing that higher vegetable intake is linked with lower psychological distress, while frequent sugary soft drinks are associated with greater odds of depression. There are gender differences in the patterns, and fibre also appears to play a role in anxiety. Importantly, this is a correlation, not causation, but the signals are strong enough to make us ask, could everyday choices on our plates help protect our minds? To unpack the evidence, the limitations and the practical takeaways for families, we're joined by Dr. Kerri Gillespie from Queensland University of Technology's School of Clinical Sciences, who's been closely involved with this work. Kerri, welcome to Wellbeing.
Hi.
Your background is in psychology and neuroscience, and you have a lot of years of experience in health and medical research. Was there a particular reason you wanted to focus on diet and psychological distress?
Oh, well, I've always had an interest in diet and how it impacts our lives. I've always felt that my own diet personally really influences my own mood and mental well-being. So I've always had a real interest in that. And we just had a great data set sitting there, the Australian population data, which collects information on vegetables and psychological distress, and I thought it might be a great thing to look at.
First of all, just explain what psychological distress encompasses.
Okay, so psychological distress sort of encompasses depression, anxiety and stress. Right. It's just sort of an umbrella term. It's a common tool used in population studies.
And what's the link between that and diet?
Well, what we found when we looked at fruit and vegetables separately, we found that overall, as people increased their vegetable intake, their risk of psychological distress did reduce for vegetables. And for fruit, there seemed to be some improvement when people ate the recommended amount, which is 2 serves a day, but not a huge improvement after that. We did find differences in the gender when we looked and stratified it by sex. We did find that women did seem to be more sensitive to diet, and they had greater improvements with increased vegetable intake and with fruit, whereas men seem to have reduced risk of psychological distress eating up to 3 to 4 serves a day, but there wasn't an increased benefit of 5 or more, and no impact of fruit seen for men in this particular data set.
Okay. What did the study reveal about fruit consumption and its impact on mental health?
It's interesting because I'm not 100% sure, but what I think is that it sort of seems to say that perhaps fruit isn't quite as important as vegetables, maybe, or it could be heavily dependent on the type of fruit people are eating. We didn't, unfortunately, gather information on, what fruits and vegetables people are eating. So it could be that the sugar in fruit is having a detrimental impact, or that the vitamins and minerals in different types of fruit are very varied. I'm not 100% sure what that finding means, really.
Do you have any idea why women might benefit from higher daily servings of vegetables compared with men?
Yeah, well, I have a few theories. Well, women do metabolize sugar and carbs differently to men. Estrogen does change the way we store and utilize those carbs that we eat. So it could just be a factor of how the body is using that energy. It also could be because women do experience higher levels of psychological distress as well as higher rates of chronic illness. So they may just be more sensitive to anything that can possibly reduce that, may have a bigger impact on those rates of psychological distress because they're already at a higher level than men are, just generally overall.
Now, you've pointed out that it's not causation necessarily, it's a correlation.
Yes.
So can you clarify why that's an important distinction?
Well, it's important because there are other factors that may be influencing that relationship. So it could be that fruits and vegetables are solely, having an influence on our mental health. It could also be that people who eat more vegetables tend to do more exercise or tend to do other things that are related to improved health. And it could be the exercise and the other things that I have no doubt are also improving our mental health. But we don't know how much those other factors are improving the mental health and how much it's the diet. So it's very important not to make an assumption that it's just the diet. I think what it's definitely saying is that diet does influence mental health. It does have an impact. And also I think what the findings say is that physical and mental health are very much interlinked. You can't hurt or help one without affecting the other. But this just sort of raises a lot more questions that we should be looking into regarding how much diet has an influence, what types of fruits and vegetables.
So this has set some future research for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it sort of poses more questions perhaps than it answers, but it's definitely put us on a good trajectory for future research, yeah.
Are there confounding factors like income and education or lifestyle that could influence both diet and mental health?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So we tried to control for those as best we can. However, it's always difficult because, yes, things like income, obviously, I think everyone understands that the lower people from lower socioeconomic environments tend to have more anxiety, which makes sense. People who are, more highly educated tend to have higher health literacy and higher incomes, which tends to lead to a reduced level of depression and anxiety. So, yeah, those things definitely can influence these results.
Today on Wellbeing, we're talking about the link between diet and psychological distress with Dr. Kerri Gillespie from Queensland University of Technology's School of Clinical Sciences. Kerri, in your second survey-based study, what was the link between sugary soft drink intake and depression?
We did ask people to give us an approximation of how many how many sugar-sweetened beverages they drank. So it wasn't necessarily soft drinks, but it was mostly soft drinks. Mm-hmm. And people who tended to drink more sugary drinks more frequently did tend to have worse scores on our depression scale. So there was a little bit of an association there between depression and drinking a lot of sugary drinks. Now, we may not have thought much of that, but it does reflect what other people have found in the research. So it just sort of supports other findings that not just sugar, having a bit, but having quite a lot, having an excess amount of sugar does seem to maybe have an influence on our moods.
And do you know what's happening biologically that's causing that? That there's a spike in glucose?
Oh, well, I mean, there could be a few things. Yes, it could be something to do with the impact of sugar on the dopaminergic sort of reward centre. You get a big high when you have something you like, and then when it's gone, you get a reduction in that, which causes a bit of a withdrawal, sort of similar to drugs, maybe not on the same level, but same sort of reaction. And there's also, I guess you've heard about the microbiome. It's very big at the moment. Everyone's investigating how our diet affects us through our gut. And what they've found in mice is that high sugar, high fat, high salt diets can impair the gut lining, which allows a lot of bacteria and different things we don't want getting through the gut lining into the bloodstream, which leads to inflammation in the body. And we think that maybe that high inflammation causes neuroinflammation and affects different parts of the brain, and that could potentially also be why our moods are affected, particularly long-term from having poor diets for a very long period of time.
You looked at fibre as well too, didn't you? And fibre intake is associated with anxiety levels.
We did find that. So we only looked at diet for a 24-hour period, and then at that same 24-hour period measured anxiety. So we did find that people who had higher levels of fibre in their diets did tend to have lower anxiety levels. Again, that's also been seen in other research studies. So we found that really interesting, and again, could be because people who are eating more diets have a better gut microbiome that's protecting them from from the detrimental impacts of high sugar, high fat foods. Or it could just be the higher nutrient intake in, say, vegetables and other high fibre foods that they're eating.
I've heard too that if you have a high fibre intake first when you start eating, then you have something sweet later on in the meal, like a dessert, that doesn't give you such a sugar spike because you've got that fibre in there already.
Well, the fibre is thought to, protect the gut lining, and it has a number of different functions. I don't doubt that's possibly true.
Do you plan to conduct larger studies to investigate the pattern with fibre and sugary drinks as well?
Oh, look, we would love to. Again, it all sort of depends on funding and things like that. So I work across a number of different studies related to mental health. And while I'm really interested in diet, these studies looking at diet are so difficult because you really need to investigate what people do all day, which relies on people pumping in what they eat every day into an app or some form, and so it can be very labour intensive and take a long time. So it's quite complex research.
The data set was quite large that you did this on, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, so this was Australian census data over 3 different census years. So we managed to get over 45,000 people within the data set, which is fantastic. Yeah.
Let's look at the public health implications, can we? How do your findings support the existing dietary guidelines promoting more vegetables and less sugar?
Well, I mean, that's the tough one, really. Is it enough to just provide education, or should we be doing things like taxing high sugar drinks and foods? I'm not sure. I mean, research in other countries has been mixed. I think mostly it has shown that having a tax on things like sugary drinks has helped reduce consumption. But I think education helps. If people know something is bad for them, then that's more likely to help them change their behaviour. And I think we have maybe some issues with health literacy in the country, but I'm not really sure how we can improve that. I guess we need to think of better campaigns that are up to date with how people are now using technology and absorbing their information.
It's a choice people can make, but they have to have the information first, don't they? They have to know, yes, this is harmful and this is not, but you make the choice. Exactly.
And while I do think it's good to always have good regulations around how our food's produced and what's in it, that's definitely a huge part of it. But also we just need to provide people with that information.
What we're just talking about is people making the right choices. Did your study consider how accessible vegetables and fruit are, particularly in remote or underserved communities?
Yes, actually, we didn't look into that. But yes, I do understand there are food deserts in this country, especially very rural and remote communities sort of have to take what they can get and what's available to them. So yeah, I'm not saying it's going to be a simple thing for everyone to do. I think the best thing is just to try and make the best choices with what we have, I guess. Yeah, I think just one step is just trying to limit that excess sugar and things like that we have in our diet. That could potentially help, Yeah,
personal choice again. Are you exploring whether growing or consuming local produce has added to mental health benefits?
I haven't, but that would be very interesting. Are you just talking about local farmers or people even growing their own?
Well, I kind of think that if it's a locally grown thing and the local farmers markets and all, that creates a certain vibe around getting good quality produce.
It does, actually, and there are some great projects happening around out of Brisbane, I know, with some small sort of growers, including schools and teaching local communities about locally grown produce, which is fantastic, and it would be great if we could do a bit more of that. Yeah, I definitely think there probably are a lot of local growers that we could be going to. I'm not sure how we can access that. I'm sure there's information on social media and things like that. But no, I haven't personally looked into that.
What's next for your research team then? Any upcoming diet, mental health projects?
My supervisor, Professor Selena Bartlett, and I have been discussing perhaps writing a book about diet and mental health, particularly vegetables. But we do have a few other projects going on, so hopefully we can get some time to do that later in the year.
Does looking at the research results influence what you eat yourself personally?
Yes, actually. I've definitely increased my fibre intake and my vegetable intake, and I think my supervisor can say the same thing. And I've reduced my caffeine and alcohol consumption as well. And I must say, I am personally feeling a lot better.
Right, good. Well, that's good. The proof of the pudding, eh?
Yes, yeah, you got to do it if you want to tell everyone else to do something. You've got to do it yourself.
Do it yourself. Are there any other dietary components that you're interested in, such as omega-3 fatty acids or processed foods, for instance?
Actually, yes, processed foods is becoming kind of. People are starting to become aware of the detrimental impacts of processed foods. Lately, I have seen a lot of research about that. That is quite interesting. Yes, I've always tried to avoid eating processed foods myself, but we haven't looked at that because, unfortunately, the data set that we had didn't collect a lot of information about processed foods, but I definitely think that's a great area of future research.
Today on Wellbeing, we're talking about the link between diet and psychological distress with Dr. Kerri Gillespie from Queensland University of Technology's School of Clinical Sciences. I'm wondering, for individuals who struggle to eat enough vegetables or to limit their sugar, what small steps would you encourage to help them?
I think any behaviour change is really about very small steps, as you say. Just it's really unsustainable to make massive changes. And it also is very discouraging. If you try and make a massive change and you fail, then it makes it harder to want to do that again. So it really is about very minor steps that you can continue and build upon. For myself, I know I started out with, I'd have three sugars in my coffee every morning, and I just slowly reduced that over about 6 months until I had no sugar in my coffee. And I'm just making very small steps, just one at a time. Good
for you. Finally, what's the most surprising takeaway from your research that people might not expect? You've been talking to quite a few people about this. What most surprises people?
I think the gender disparity, and I know that was the biggest standout for me, and I know that seems to be what most people have asked me about. I sort of knew that women did metabolize carbohydrates a little bit differently, but I didn't really think the impact of diet on mental health would be so starkly different in men and women.
We've looked at what diet does for your mood, your psychological health. What about exercise?
Yeah, that's another big factor. And I personally believe, from what I've read and seen over the last 10 years, the three major things that really impact our physical and mental health are diet, exercise, and our social supports. And exercise is a huge one as well. And we did find that people who had moderate and high levels of exercise also had much lower levels of psychological distress.
I've heard people recommend 4 exercise straight after eating. This is moderate. Don't just go for a gentle walk after you've eaten as being beneficial. And other people say, no, you shouldn't do any exercise after eating. But I think probably the former gets the big tick now, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, the gut, when you just have eaten, it sort of goes into rest and digest mode. And when you're active, it increases the sympathetic nervous system, which slows down digestion. So that could be why they advise you to have a little bit, or don't exercise too heavily after eating, because your body needs to focus on digestion.
What's the big take-home that somebody hearing this for the first time, if they're thinking, how could I change my diet? I'm dealing with depression, I'm anxious all the time. What would you recommend them to do?
Well, I think, obviously, if you're suffering from quite extreme mental health issues, changing your diet may not be the be-all and end-all, but I think to support that improvement in mental health, a good diet is definitely a big factor. I just think really focusing on reducing excessive sugars, any sort of foods that are very high in sugars, like soft drinks, and just trying to find a way to add a little bit of high fibre food into any meal. Add an extra vegetable, put a little bit of all bran on the cereal you're having. Just try and shove a little bit extra in there somewhere if you can.
A savoury breakfast instead of a sweet breakfast might be another possibility.
Yes, perhaps, yeah. A high fibre, change from a white bread to a more high fibre bread. Just making little switches, maybe look at your cereal, see what the sugar levels are in your cereal, maybe see if you can switch to a slightly better one.
It's the little things that make the difference, yeah?
It is the little things, and trying to get in a little bit more incidental exercise, I think, is always a good thing. Parking slightly further away from the shopping centre, using the stairs instead of the lift. All these little things add up.
Thanks, Kerri. Thanks for talking to us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I've been speaking with Dr. Kerri Gillespie from Queensland University of Technology's School of Clinical Sciences, and we've been talking about new research from the Translational Research Institute in Brisbane that's found clear correlations between diet and mental health, showing that higher vegetable intake is linked with lower psychological distress. Thanks for listening. I'm Graham Wilson, and all of us at Wellbeing wish you well.